to start with following the order. President Thomas Rosenbaum from Caltech.
Great, thanks. So I hope you can see my screen. I hope I've learned something in terms of a year or 2 years now on Zoom. So I thought I would just do a brief summary of how we've thought about the last year and the lessons that we've learned from it. And I suspect that this story will be very similar to the ones that you will be telling. You can see from this slide that we launched actually a program called Caltech Together to try to reach out to all members of the community and talk about the fact that this was a community effort and we'd only succeed in terms of our mission of research and education if everybody pulled together and helped us realize our goals. So I want to start with last fall. We switched very quickly. We don't have a lot of students. We have a total of 950 undergraduates and 1,300 graduate students. But we were able to, in fall term, to offer essentially all our courses. We weren't able to offer a few laboratory courses, but in fact, we sent materials and kits to students who were situated at home to do some of the laboratory experiments. We developed all kinds of electronic tools with lots of files and access. With Zoom, of course, we spent a lot of money setting up the various accounts and storage. We distributed then a lot of materials to our faculty members to aid in their development of the course and the teaching. The students as well, who did not have the right sort of equipment to be able to get through this. And we developed videos, demos, tutorials, and so on, which were used, I think, with a fair amount of enthusiasm. And so our numbers are small, but just to give you a sense of how the campus was able to pivot relatively quickly. We also had a series on what the lessons people learned. And of course, this was during the pandemic and they were teaching, but is very useful now as we look back. Well, we may not be looking back. We may be engaging again on another remote session, but we hope not. And you can see that various individuals who taught courses from biology through material science, through geology, adapted this way. We had virtual field trips. The geology program at Caltech is very oriented towards getting out and doing experiments. We wound up, as I said, sending various supplies to homes to do some of our laboratory courses, including turning your CD drive into a scientific instrument. The students who went through this found online learning challenging, but there was good repartee between the students and the faculty. We learned that students certainly appreciate being able to look at classes in their own time. And we continue now to record classes so students can access them at their convenience. One of the big challenges was collaborating. We have a core curriculum at Caltech where everybody has to take physics, math, chemistry, engineering, biology. And students get through it to a large extent by working together on problem sets. And that's much harder to do remotely. And I think that's one of the lessons that I'll come to at the end, that I think you do lose something here. And having intent about how you engage with the students and they can learn from each other is extremely important. We organize groups online of 7 or 8 students with a TA, with a faculty member, but I think that really didn't make up for it. Students, of course, were in very different environments and a lot of reports of burnout and need for psychological counseling, which I think all of us have seen. Over summer, we started repopulating campus. We had basically 1/4 of the number of students we would normally have on campus, but a lot of enthusiasm. And then this fall, what we've learned is that there's just enormous energy and enthusiasm of the students being back on campus. I must say, I see that as well. We have a little outdoor cafeteria here, and I just love to go over and just see who's around and talk to people. The applications, you put that down as one of the items of interest. Being remote did not do anything to prohibit students from thinking about coming to Caltech. In fact, we had a jump of 60% in the number of applications. Our admissions rate declined to 3.9%, which is not a healthy sign, but is a representation of the interest. I think technological schools see this particularly now in times of economic uncertainty. But I think a lot of our peers are seeing the same increase in the interest in higher education. And gratifyingly, our yield rate increased by 10 percentage points. So students not only just applying to more places or thinking more about Research One universities, but they were more likely to accept. With the students back, as I said, the energy and enthusiasm that just isn't there online returned. The barriers for group work, which is very important in the sciences, also declined. And on the research side, these serendipitous encounters, which just make it not only fun, but expand your horizons and lead to collaborations, showed up again. And I think these last 3 points as we move forward are going to be essential as we think about moving to a hybrid modality. Now, we can capture some of what we do, but not all of it. So I am very keen to hear about everybody else's experiences, and I hope this at least sets the stage for some of the discussion.
Chancellor Jean Block, UCLA, next.
Thank you. So I'll cover a few different aspects of sort of the impact of the pandemic as we saw from UCLA. So talking about international students, we saw a slight reduction in the number of students enrolled in the fall of 2020. We normally enroll about 650 international students each year, and I think it went down to about 500. So we had a slight reduction, but it's back up again, and seems to be very little diminishment from the pandemic in terms of interest in at least coming to UCLA. From Korea, we normally get about 1,500 applications. That's sort of what we got in 2015, sort of onward, and that's remained the same. That remained strong throughout the pandemic. Interestingly, a lot of our students from Korea actually have their high school experience in the US. So Korean parents, when they decide to have an international experience for their children, often invest earlier than simply when they come to college. So in terms of enrollment, we actually were not much impacted by the pandemic. The impact of the pandemic on teaching effectiveness was really interesting, and I think Tom brought up some of the challenges, obviously, and we certainly are happy to be back in person. But we did find there was a great attention paid by our faculty, research-based pedagogy. They really embraced it and became innovative, and it's clearly here to stay in some hybrid formats. Actually, it was very successfully used in many cases, and I think many faculty actually have believed that it's certainly a very important methodology as we go forward, at least in hybrid form. One of the things we found, which was very interesting, was we learned, so faculty became very alert to the differences in equity. We have many students from very low-income families, and you don't recognize that when they're in a classroom, but you recognize that when they're at home. And either they do not have their own room to study, so they're in awkward places to receive online education, or in many cases, we saw students even literally in their automobiles getting free Wi-Fi because they had limited Wi-Fi access at home or sharing it with other children and their families. So there was a great concern about the digital divide and equity, which I think gave us a lasting impression of, as we use online education, we're going to have to be mindful of the digital divide. And we supplied many, many devices, MiFi devices and computers to students to help balance and make it a little more fair. We did find something quite remarkable, though. When we looked at the grades of students, how they performed in remote education, we found that all students did a little better. We're not surprised. I think faculty were sympathetic with students that were struggling with a difficult situation. But our underrepresented students, our first generation students, that is our Pell Grant students, students on financial support, actually performed proportionally better when they were remote. And that's fascinating. So they actually did considerably better with remote education. And that's something we're now investigating. And we're looking at that throughout the UC system, that we think there may be some benefits to online education that we hadn't thought about before. Perhaps it's the sociology of the classroom, the in-person experience for some of our students, but clearly remote education has some advantages for certain groups of our students. And finally, we found that COVID-19, our research productivity was really unaffected. Quite amazingly, I think our research awards went up the last 2 years, more awards were awarded, and certainly faculty were able to cope quite well with the remote situation. I think international collaborations actually blossomed through the use of Zoom and other platforms. We're actually finding increased collaborations, and overall, the pandemic, as terrible as it has been, in terms of educational effectiveness, I think at the university level, at least at UCLA, I think we've done a fairly good job of weathering the challenges, and we've learned a lot about new platforms, which we hope we'll use more effectively in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move to the next speaker, President Hyungju Park, Aju University.
Hello, hi. The previous presentations by Professor Rosenbaum and Chancellor Bloch were very interesting. There are certain things that we share, and at the same time, there are certain differences. One thing is, in terms of teaching, the drop rate among the freshmen went up surprisingly, actually a lot, by much, and so we were actually very surprised because so many freshmen actually chose to drop out during the academic year. And I guess it's because the freshmen couldn't see the campus, couldn't see their friends, and couldn't actually even personally meet with their professors. And so they felt probably less attached to the campus that they chose, and that actually resulted in this higher rate of dropout. And so we were actually very worried about this new phenomenon. And so this happened last year, and so this year we actually proactively adopted several measures. I mean, for example, even during the pandemic, we actually invited at least the freshmen to campus once, at least, or twice a semester, and so that they can actually divide into small groups and meet with their professors and advisors, so that way they can at least have some personal touch. And this helped. So the student drop rate actually this year has gone down a little bit, but still higher than usual. So it's apparently a pandemic definitely affected the students' campus life. And another thing is about the student exchange. Our inbound program kind of is back to normal this year. I mean, we have many visiting students from Europe, from Germany and France, and it looks like the European culture is that they still go out. I mean, no matter what. So our inbound is back to normal, I can say, but our outbound program is very badly affected, and we have very small number of students willing to go out go overseas, and the parents wouldn't let their kids to go out. I mean, they are so worried. So I guess this is a cultural thing. I mean, Korean culture, they are more worried, and they actually choose to stay home. And I guess so. As I said, as for the student exchange, our inbound is back, but outbound is still a long way to go. And then about the GPA, students' GPA. Apparently, we noticed that there is a GPA inflation. I mean, the students' GPA definitely went up. There are several reasons. I mean, the professors probably were a little more sympathetic, and another thing is typically our classes are curved. I mean, so a certain number of students, always get certain grades and stuff. But during the pandemic, because student collaboration also is important, and it's very difficult that students collaborate with each other. So to encourage students to collaborate rather than compete, we ask the professors to not to curve the grades, but rather set up certain goals and academic goals, and if the student passed that goal, then just give them the grades that they deserve, things like that. So this resulted in GPA inflation. But I think, but the good thing, positive side is at least the students started collaborating, and students view each other as collaborators rather than computers. So I think that there is always positive and negative sides, but what we gained is, I think in this case, is more important. So this short-term academic GPA inflation, I think we can get over with it. But students now are starting to collaborate. I think that's really a good sign. So it's something that we gained during the pandemic. Lastly, in terms of academic or research, I think the research productivity has gone up. It's hard to say. But thing is, the isolated research seems to be more popular, because the things that they can do in their own office or in their labs, I mean, they were not badly affected. However, those group research, the research that they have to regularly meet and do certain things together, I think they are slow. So there is definitely so people adapted to the situation, but I hope that this collective and collaborative research come back to normal soon. But I can report that there was a different pattern of performing research at right now. Another good thing is many seminars, academic conferences went online, and then the attendance has gone up much more. Has gone up like 3 times or 4 times. I mean, because more people can actually easily participate. So many seminars and academic conferences are thriving, and also at the same time, it's easy to invite big names to those meetings, because the big names do not have to fly to Korea, but rather they can just easily participate. So that way, I think academic meetings are thriving, and this is something that should go on. And international collaborations are also very active across, and so there are always pros and cons, but I think there are things that we gained, and we should now think about how to continue this momentum into next year. So these are the things that I observed, and yeah.
All right. Thank you. I'm glad to hear there's a lot of things going positive so far. Next, I'd like to introduce President Carol Falk from USC.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and I'm really enjoying hearing what everybody is saying. I think I share a lot of what you were hearing from Tom and Jean, in part because we're all in Los Angeles. We've had similar experiences in terms of the COVID. We also have the same county health authorities that manage what happens in our university. So we share some similarities, but it's been, it's really been a ride, and we're still on it. And I think all of us are still learning. I think, like all of you, I've been surprised at how much we've been able to accomplish during this. And in fact, it's been really pretty impressive, and I've been moved by the kinds of things that people do. I'm just showing some pictures. At one point I ran 14 commencements, separate commencements in the Coliseum, 14 of them over a 2-week period. I presided at every single one, and every single student got in-person commencement, and it meant a lot to them. So the things we did do meant a lot. People showed a lot of gratitude, and I thought that was quite beautiful. I also oversee, as does Jean, and I'm sure I know many of you, a very large medical health system, and they're all part of our students, our faculty, our staff, and I think our student health systems were saviors. They were amazing. They worked so incredibly hard, not only keeping us safe, keeping millions of people safe in Los Angeles, but we spend a lot of time not just working in our own hospitals, but we went out and vaccinated and tested the local communities. And we're doing again, administering tests, having your pharmacy students go out. So a lot of interaction with the local community that I think has been very well appreciated, but has been a critical part of our work, and work that we weren't necessarily expecting. So, I was only the president here for 8 months. So I'm a new president even, and I had to meet and learn everybody while being online. So that in itself has been a real challenge. But I'll go through a couple of the same sorts of things, but with the perspective from USC. One thing, in terms of size, we're large. So there's 80,000 people roughly at USC. We have 47,000 students, and they're in 22 different professional schools. So we do everything from dance to dentistry, it is all there. And every single one of them had to move classes online in a 3-day period. They had to go to virtual format. And, when you're trying to teach a dance school, that's different than trying to teach a political science major, and it's different than trying to train clinicians in how to be doctors. And so there was unbelievable innovation in what people did to keep all of those disciplines going once we went online. We created a whole online teaching institute, 1,200 of our faculty, all these workshops. We were doing a lot to help them figure out how to do what they did online. Some of the work that was the most exciting to me, I was amazed that our music students we have the best cinema school potentially in the world, but a really great cinema school. They're still creating movies. They're still doing documentaries. You have your businesses. The things that they did were so creative. I attended a PhD thesis defense by someone that is a conductor. He was getting his PhD in conducting, and he created this amazing online platform, and he conducted, and it was maybe the most entertaining orchestral performance I've ever been to. So there's lots of that, and I think that will be fueling a lot of the creative economy going forward. So we had a lot of innovative faculty. One of our science faculty sent labs home to every single student and made them go out in their garages or out in their backyard and try to do labs. So huge credit to the people that did it. And I think as the same thing you're hearing, we had amazing success for that. That was important. But I think that investment in student teaching was something very important that we did. And I think we have to keep doing it, because we have to get better at developing hybrid courses. I don't think we're going to lose the idea that many courses have an online and an in-person component. So I think a big burst of energy of things. We also had, just in thinking of our international students, I will say that we had over 1,000 of our international students stayed living with us for the 1.5 years of the COVID, because they couldn't go home. They had to live in dorms, there was isolation. So we needed to keep a large percentage of our staff still cooking, working with our online students, trying to deal with their depression from being away with their family, all of that. We wouldn't change it for a moment, but it was a really important part of what we do. I remember bumping into a student who'd been here for almost a year and a half when we were first able to walk around campus, and you could just see he couldn't have been more excited than to bump into a human being after all that time isolated. So things like that were really good. I'll do my next slide, Breen, thanks. We didn't see any dip in our recruitment or our retention. We had our highest enrollment in the next fall, and that's in all of our programs. You know, I think like you're seeing, we're actually getting our best students ever. And that was students coming still from 88 different countries. So our international was high, although there was a tiny dip in the master's level student in international, but it's already back up, just as you heard people say. So, you know, we continue to try to do that. And like a lot of my colleagues, we were fighting with the government to keep visas going. That was a big part of our effort early in the pandemic, was trying to continue to keep visas. In the next slide, I'll just talk really briefly about research, because like all of you, we too did not see a dip in research. But I will say, I was talking to a lot of our research faculty that were in the lab. You know, early on, we opened the labs with lots of spacing and lots of protective measures, but some of them developed whole new research areas that were more online, data analytics, and some of them say their research took a whole leap in another direction, and that's been very exciting to them. They also use Zoom to continue their international collaborations, and again, I think that has been important. They also used COVID to spur research. And I know everyone here has seen the same thing. A lot of them weren't necessarily working on COVID, but that became a big part of their research. So in some ways, they were developing new tracing ways. They were doing seed grants, working across institutions, and it did end up in our highest research funding ever, in part because it was also directed towards what the country has needed. And now those programs are very invested in continuing in that area. So, you know, I think you see your points of expertise, some of them twisted and moved, but it's pretty exciting to see what it's doing. We also noticed our faculty were so intense that they increased the number of proposals they submitted by 20%. So here they are working at home, taking care of families, elderly parents, children, pumping out research proposals, and we saw an increase in proposals to our Korean sponsors. So that is interesting. We have lots and lots of collaborations, and those were really continuing to grow. We too saw, like the others, that our students actually did better academically, and we had the same thing, Jean, that our students that were first gen and others actually disproportionately performed better. So just like you, that is of real interest to us. Why did that happen? And were we just better teachers? I don't know. All that stuff is a really important thing for us to think about, how we can use that knowledge in the future. So really quickly, let's see, I think I might have another one. This year, they're all back. We were one of the first universities to come back fully because we start early, and it has been phenomenal. Everybody got the vaccine. We have had not one surge, although now Omicron, everyone's gone, but we were starting to see a slight surge on the last day that students were here. We did over 500,000 tests. I mean, this is costing a fortune, but people won't come back if they're not being tested, with a very low 0.2% positivity rate. And most of the classes were in person. We also gave up all of our space at the hotel we run to house our students when they got positive tests for COVID. And we ran a big program for healthcare workers all across Los Angeles to have free stays at our hotel when they got tired or they thought they had COVID and couldn't go home. Then last thing that's an American thing, maybe was true other places, there was a lot of money put out by the government to try to help. We used all that money, and we got something like $50 million to support students who lost their leases, you know, all these extra expenses. We tried to help them so that they didn't go broke, so they could come back. And I think that's why we retained them. I think for a lot of them, that was the difference between dropping out, and we're so much more expensive than probably a lot of other places, but it made a huge difference. And we see the next one. A lot of people coming back. Is there any more slides, Reed?
No more.
Okay, we did, we saw, even in Korea, our Korea graduate students are up 20% over last fall. So I think these things are paying off, but if we have to go into COVID full quarantine again, I think it's going to be a real testament, a try to us, because we had to spend something like $200 to $300 million more during COVID to cover tests, to cover financial aid, to help people with apartments. And there's just not that many years you can continue to try to cover that. So we have to do everything possible to stay in person. So that's a sort of an overview of ours. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. President Yoon,
Yeah.
can you?
Okay. My name is Eugene Yun. I'm the founding president of the Cantech. Cantech is a new university which will be operating next March. We received 2,400 applicants for 100 slots. So it's very competitive from the beginning. I'll show you a little bit about our Cantech and why we established a new institution in Naju area, a southern part of Korea. As you know, that the G7 summit, recent G7 summit in UK shows that the climate change is a worldwide task, and there are a lot of the people are worried about the change in climate and the environment. So our president recently announced the net zero by 2050. The goal NDC for 2030 is a 40% reduction with the respect to 2018 total CO2 emission, and we'll achieve a net zero emission by 2050. It's very, very ambitious. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about the Cantech project. Actually, in early 2017, our government decided we plan to build a new university. So that the plan was included in the government 5-year operation plan. And then in 2019, basic plan for CAPCO at that time, I'll tell you a little bit about that, was approved by the Presidential Committee for Balanced National Development. And then 2019, September, inaugural BOD meeting was held. Okay. And then, okay, next. A lot of people were puzzled why we built a Cantech at Naju City. As you can see in the map on the right-hand side, the Naju is located in the southern western part of the Korean Peninsula, but that dates back to 2004, because as you may know, Korea has highly populated metropolitan city, Seoul. More than half of people gathered together live in Seoul. So at that time, the President Roh worried about the heavy concentration of population. So they planned to disperse that to around the Korean Peninsula, and then they made a law. So the first law is Balanced Development of Land Law Act in 2004. Subsequently, they passed another act, Relocation of Public Enterprises NOCT Construction, in 2007. After that, a lot of cities was constructed. So construction was ended about 2014, and then government, as promised, relocated a lot of public enterprises to the other places. So, for example, Naju was one of the Naju Innovation City, and then 16 public enterprises are Korea Electric Power Company, which is the world 6th largest utility company in the world, and other public enterprises were relocated to Naju. At the same time, a lot of SMEs moved down to Naju to work together with the Capco. So from that time, people began to call Naju is the center of the Energy Valley. However, there is no big university nearby. So they need an innovation hub for the Energy Valley. Next. The Naju area is very good for renewable energy research. This is one of the example. The early this year, the President Moon came down to the Naju area and had a ceremony. So $40 billion investment ceremony supporting 8.2 gigawatt offshore wind power plant generation. Next. At the same time, the Naju area is very good for solar energy. So this is another big project. We completed a solar farm of 89 megawatt near Naju. Okay, next. So Caltech has a mission. The Caltech wants to focus on energy issues and to become a world top 10 university in energy engineering, specifically by 2015. So we had 3 goals. In education, we foster creative problem-solving future energy researchers and entrepreneurs to cope with global climate crisis. For education, we benchmark Olin College of Engineering. We have 100% PBL based. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, it's my fault. Let me see.
Okay. For education, we follow the principles of the Olin College of Engineering. So we have 100% the PBL-based learning. We also had a contract with the Minerva project. So we'll have online the debate using the Minerva platform. At the same time, we subscribe the EDX access partnership so that all the courses in the EDX can be accessible to all the participants in our university. They have all the credentials, the certificates. In research, we focus on the 5 core areas. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. We put heavy emphasis on university-industry relationship. Next.
Okay.
Next, please.
Yep.
Okay, so this is Caltech at a glance. So Caltech stands for Korea Institute of Energy Technology. It is located in Naju area, and expect to open March 22nd next year. The campus area is about 400,000 meters square. We will have 100 undergraduate for total 400 undergraduate, and we will have 600 graduate students, so total 1,000. In addition to that, we'll have additional 300 foreign students. All courses will be taught in English, and we will hire 100 professors, and we will hire 100 staff members. So far, we have hired 50 professors and 50 staff members. And as I told you earlier, we are in the process of selecting the early acceptance. So we've received 24,000 applicants out of 100 slots. So it is very, very popular these days. Next, please. Oh, let's go back. So in addition to a university area, we'll have a cluster area, 400,000, and large-scale research area, 400,000, nearby our campus. For cluster, we will accept the university branches, industry research institutes, etc. Also, we will have the areas for startups. For large area research area, large facility research area, we will have nuclear fusion facility, as well as the high power laser facility, etc. So this is the overview, bird's eye view of our new campus. We'll have this kind of campus in at the end of by 2025. We will invest almost $1 billion for 10 years for construction of these, the campus and the operation for 10 years. These are 5 core research areas for our university. We will focus on artificial intelligence for energy systems. We'll also focus on new energy materials and devices for energy system. For example, solar panel and battery materials and high power electronic materials, something like that. And the third one is the grid modernization. We'll focus on DC and AC transmission together with a lot of microgrids, something like that. And the fourth one is hydrogen energy. We will focus on green production of green hydrogen, liquefaction, transmission, utility, etc. The last one, but not the least, is environmental and climate technology, carbon capture, artificial photosynthesis, and stuff like that. Next, please. So far, we have signed an MOU with a lot of domestic and international organizations. A few weeks ago, I traveled to France and Germany to sign an MOU with the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft and CNRS and German Lithium Institute and Hochschule Anhalt. We also signed an MOU with the domestic companies like DIG Airgas, SKNS, something like that. We expect to have more. I didn't mention our inbound and outbound program. I hope every student from Caltech is qualified for graduation with at least 1 semester experience in foreign universities. So I'm looking for our partner universities overseas. And then I like to get more the connection with foreign universities. If I have a chance, I'd like to give my detailed information to the presidents to president participating in this the forum. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I have a question. Why you don't have anybody from United States? You got 4 from Germany.
We are talking right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we are talking with universities in US.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
I have a question.
Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for all the this very valuable information. One thing that both Jean and Carol said about the students' performance, especially for minority students, for example, they did better. I taught the physics class this winter, and my experience is that both of the students, you tend to not raise their hands in person classroom. I let them use a chat box. So there are a lot of questions that came in through chat box. So I'm wondering, this environment is much more now, how do I say, easy for those who tend to be quiet and shy, have a chance to express their questions without, much of concerns. I'm just put that in as a possible the answers, but that may not be. Another thing that I noticed is we also sent the the lab, the equipment, so electronics and simple electronics, we sent each to individual students. So in the real, the lab course, we have like 3 hours, a very time limited physics lab course, and they have to finish it, and there's a lot of pressure. Instead, if they receive this equipment and they do it at home, and they have many more hours they can spend. So especially those students who are not very a lot of experience before and well prepared and can do quickly, they have a more time to understand and go through. I'm wondering something like that could affect more positively to those students who have a bit better, a bit less the background preparation.
So maybe I'll start. I think that's very possible that's an explanation. There is a sociology to a classroom, and you find that some students are very reluctant to ask questions. And it so shows up in some classrooms with women being less willing to ask questions. It probably is a profound problem, for example, some of our African-American students who may feel uncomfortable in a classroom and more empowered in sort of the Zoom environment that's a bit more democratic. I think, as you pointed out, it shows up with more questions in chat than you normally see in a classroom normally. But I'm really fascinated whether it might free some students up who are very anxious being in a classroom. They're more comfortable in a Zoom format. I think we don't know that as the fact yet, but it's a very intriguing sort of hypothesis and suggestion that maybe Zoom can, the Zoom or, online platforms can be used effectively to help level some of the problems we see in performance.
I think the difference is more dramatic in Korea. Because there always has been this this typical view that Korean students tend not to ask questions in classes. This is just a long time myth. They are more passive, and there are many explanations for it. For example, Korean K-12 system is very strict, and the Korean, especially high schools, are very competitive because everybody wants to enter good colleges, and there is a very strong competition there. So this has been a long time myth that Korean students just take notes rather than ask questions. And I also kind of believe that theory. However, this is one single thing that we really learned, or we really gained during the pandemic. That is, students are asking questions. By the chat box, of course. This really surprises me and many of my colleagues. So it was a myth that actually proved not to be true. That Korean students are just passive and do not ask questions. Maybe they didn't have the right channel to ask questions. Because Korean students tend, in Korean culture, they tend not to, for example, halt the classes just because of their curiosity, because they think they are obstructing other students' learning process, right? So they choose not to interrupt the classes. However, this chat box, they do not have to interrupt anybody's, and they just freely ask questions, and now we are gaining tons of questions. So we really had the wrong theory. Korean students actually can ask questions, are willing to ask questions, but they didn't have the right channel. So I'm very happy that actually Professor Kim brought out this issue that maybe this thing, we should take advantage of this, and we should think about how to continue this, into non-pandemic era.
Okay. I just have a short questions to Professor Hyungju Kim. Hyungju Park. It's interesting that your dropout rate is higher for 2 years in a row. My question is it a trend in other university, like peer university in Korea, or are they fleeing your university and go to another university?
I think both. in Korea, unfortunately, many good students with good academic credentials choose to apply to medical schools and things like that. And now that they entered colleges, and that now that they cannot even see their friends, and they don't know what the campus looks like, and so they don't feel attached to anything. They are isolated at home. So I think they take advantage of this, and rather, okay, so maybe then I will study again for medical schools or things like that. So yes, this is happening. I think that partly
it's
explains
nationwide.
the high dropout rate.
It's a nationwide problem, dropout rates.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
This is happening at other Korean universities too.
Okay, I see. All right, I have a hand raised from Cho Chun-ho.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm an associate professor of building science in the School of Architecture at USC. So it's my honor to see all the respected some presidents from very prestigious universities, especially the president Ford from USC. So actually, I have a quick question. So according to the Bloomberg, actually currently the Microsoft and Google have a very significant collaboration with Coursera. The Coursera is providing free online lecture services. So they try to make a kind of some technical classes so that they can educate some technical skill and to become an expert in the domain of computer science or some electrical engineering, so and so. So, and the other one is that their tuition is really low. It's almost like a $300 or $400 for about a 3 or 6 month period. And another thing is that according to Bloomberg, they said that the previous the U.S. government, federal government said that they want to hire people based on the skill rather than diploma. So it make us actually, I found that many students during the COVID, they selected some gap year and then they frequently use some Coursera platform to get some knowledge. So I believe that it will affect some registration or enrollment of student rate, the lower in the future, or it may be ongoing currently. So I wanted to ask any of you to share, and if you have any idea how to defend against such a trend, and then how to motivate the prospective student keep registered in your universities.
I can respond a little bit about, the Google certificates are really intriguing, and it really comes out of their foundation. It really was an effort to provide training for, underserved populations in the U.S. So it's really, they're really delivering this at cost. They're not really making any money on it, and they're fascinating, the certificate programs. I think what is being discussed in the U.S. among many educators is the idea of stackable credentials. That some students don't immediately want to go for a bachelor's degree, and perhaps what they can do is they can begin to get these stackable credentials that add up eventually, potentially, to a bachelor's degree. And I think Google's thinking that way too. That you can begin to collect these different credentials, and if you can coordinate it in some way and build in some some additional studies, it may be that they can build towards an undergraduate degree. But I think in the US, for many individuals that do not now have the time to invest in a full undergraduate experience, our veterans coming back, individuals who have been out in the workforce for a while, I think these credentials are actually very attractive. And as I said, if they can be integrated into an undergraduate, eventually into an undergraduate program, they can be very valuable if they're actually then transferable for college credit.
Okay.
I just give a quick thought about that too. One, because I think it is really pretty interesting, and it's great to see you on this video asking that question. But I think also institutions have to decide what is it that they can do that can't be done in an online course, and spend more time doing that too. Because I think there's a lot of different pathways to get a degree or to get those usable skills. And so in a big research university, some of the things you can offer is an opportunity to have more direct research, much more of you learn some of it online, and then you spend your in-class time or the things doing that work that you can only do online. Another is if you're at big universities and you want to have hybrid degrees, and I think many computational scientists want to have degrees that might be computer related, but they may be also medicine related, or they might be computer related, but they're also cinema related. So in a way, it's another look that might be stackable credentials, but I think it's finding the ways that the cross-university collaboration that is not taking place, although maybe it will one day online in the same way, becomes the attractive piece that people want to get. And in general, we have to continue to try to reduce our prices or increase our aid. I think all of those have to go together.
If I could just add briefly, I think Jean and Carol's comments testify to the heterogeneous nature of higher education. I mean, we're often lumped together, but we serve very different purposes and different clientele, often different student bases, and from community colleges to big state systems to small privates to liberal arts colleges to research universities. I think these certificate programs can be seen in that context. And I think, Carol, your point that we don't talk to each other in this ecosystem and unite it, and Jean's point of how do you integrate it into an actual undergraduate program are limiting factors, but that it's a useful addition to the ecosystem. I must say I must confess to a certain bias, which is that I worry about being too specific in skill training. I understand that industry wants certain skills, but I think with a job market that's changing and technology that changes really fast, we have to be careful to provide a more general education for students, teach them how to solve problems in general and bring insights from different fields together rather than mastering just one set of skills. And, it may not be plausible for everyone in their present circumstances to do that, but I hope we don't lose touch with that aspect of higher education, as well as developing passions for students to satisfy them for their whole lives.
All right. I'd like to add one more question on this, because in Korea, it's a very big deal to have a contract department. Company provide money and they guarantee hiring, like Samsung and Hyundai, and they provide money to university to create a department, and they will guarantee hire them. Do you have see that as a model in the United States? Korea is very popular. Company give money to the university, and after training, they hire them.
I think it's starting. There are some examples of that. And I do think in some places it's also been done with very specific centers within universities. So it's still small. It's not the overwhelming partnership yet, but we are also seeing just a lot more. It may take place more that they help fund things, then they take them as interns. And then once they've worked for the company for 3 months or something, then they hire them before they graduate. So I think it's a hybrid, but I think there's more of that. And I expect we'll see more as the job market is getting so competitive.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to next session moderator.
Thank you.
Son, Professor Son.
Yeah. Again, my name is Young-Ho Son from University of Central Florida. I'm actually a metallurgist, material science and engineering, working on additive manufacturing. So the part 2 of our forum specifically deals with kind of going forward on how to collaborate a little bit more, how to really execute the student exchange program and joint degree programs, as well as the faculty exchange program that will facilitate more research collaboration. Of course, throughout the COVID era, we found this wonderful tool of online communications and collaborations. So if you could specifically kind of address some of your thoughts on how we can go forward to increase not only the online collaboration, but in general, overall collaboration between the universities in the US and in Korea. In particular, just as we heard from Kentech, they are actively looking for these type of interactions. So I was given this program, so we'll start with President Carol Folt from USC.
I was going to say I can go ahead and get started, but
Sure.
I think I love this conversation because I think we're all looking for partnerships. If we know anything, we know that collaboration is what has to be done to solve any of the big issues and the problems that we all want to work on. And so it's great that we're all thinking about that. I think we have lots of examples of collaborations that have been very important for us, and we can collaborate in a number of different ways. So I thought I'd just mention things that could be used to help us increase it, but that are already working pretty well. We've been seeing these collaborations growing fast, and I think all of you have been talking about that too. We opened an office in Seoul in 2010, and that has been very successful. So where we have these offices, I think we have points that can really leverage the collaboration. So we've been thinking about that. That's something we think we could continue to develop. We also think we can use our online education to create more than just teaching, but also research opportunities that can reach across the globe. We have this iPodia program, which was originated in our School of Engineering, the Viterbi School of Engineering, in 2009. And it's really, we call it a classroom without border. And I think it has a very strong global perspective in that engineering program. And that includes South Korea's KAIST is a part of that program. And it creates courses. An example would be one that we call Engineering Principles and Practices of Global Innovation. And we have more than 215 students from 11 iPodia universities, and they work in physical and virtual classrooms with project teams. So I think things that we do like that take what we're already doing and intensifying them towards teaching and research is a little bit of the answer that I gave when I talked about how do you compete with the online education. We do the things that research universities can do better than anyone else, and that's start investigating and bringing all of our wonderful research into the teaching. And we've already got great ways of doing that with Korea. So I think we have a lot of start there. I'll talk a little bit about how we can increase our research, more of our collaborations. And again, we've been doing it in areas where we have obvious connections. So a lot of ours have been with our engineering school and where we've been working with the Korean Aerospace University and Inha University, because these are big areas of strength that we have. So always these collaborations are best when they build off the faculty collaborations that already exist in these research areas, and then we maybe help fuel it. Get the connections and make things really work. But that has been my own experiences that build from the ones that are already there. So that's partly what we've been doing. And this one's been funded by Korea Air and General Electric. So sometimes when we have these great partnerships, we can get companies to help provide the funding for it. And I think there are a lot of companies that want to be in both places, in our universities and in Korea. So I think that's very promising for deepening this. And we've also been trying to build the projects that have big payoff. The aviation projects look like they may have benefits in big companies, Airbus, things like that. A second example is in public policy. Now that might sound funny. How can American public policy be a great program with Korean public policy? We've got very different public policies, but they've been doing an amazing job because both institutions are interested in trying to have a global perspective to their public policy. So we have a dual degree program with Seoul National University, and they get an MPA from USC and a global MPA from Seoul National. And so that is a very highly sought after degree. I think that's another thing that could be intensified, more of these dual degrees, and some of them have an in-person component, but they get to know each other pretty well in that online environment. So those are promising, and it can use both undergraduates and graduates, and then they graduate already with connections that are worldwide. For all of them, for getting the next degree, that's a huge benefit. We also have a program like that in our liberal arts program, our arts and science, called Dornsife. That has a Korean Studies Institute in our school, and that gives an undergraduate fellow program where the students go and do research in Korea, getting exchanges where Korean students do the same and come work with us. I mean, that's the traditional thing to do, but I don't think you want to give up on that. I think it's really important, and I think it's great if our own faculty can cross-mentor across that program, across the country. And there's many more. There's a strong program in our Division of Occupational Science and Therapy, which again is a Korean exchange program with Korean universities. So I think we can do the traditional, and then we can get out there and do a lot more of the dual degree, hybrid, very specific research. We have lots of examples of faculty who are doing these ties, and I think this is the next way we grow it, is we continue to build on the people that are already doing it. And my experience in a university is if you say to people, we will help you get things going, you get more people that want to do it than you can ever fully support. So if we make clear we really mean it, we'll find great examples. These are just 3 examples where we have faculty in very different kinds of areas, from mathematics to chemistry to language and culture, who have been working very carefully, hosting a Fulbright scholar from Korea. That's a place that we'd love to do that. We have an alumni who is the first woman president of Inha University. So for us, that's a great way to continue to deepen that relationship, build on that wonderful understanding that we already have. And we're trying to get a formal partnership for exchange between our East Asian Study Center and a leading Korean university. So I think we can just be more clear about what the big portfolio of opportunities are, and let them have a bit of a grassroots thrust, because that's usually the best way. It's harder if the president says, go do this, than it is if you respond to the faculty and the students who see those opportunities for relationships to build. So thank you. Some thoughts, few ideas.
Thank you. Okay, Chancellor Jean Block.
Thank you. Well, we've historically had strong student exchange relationships with Korea, mostly through the UC system, which has the University of California as a whole has a very well-developed student exchange program, which many of our students have taken advantage of. But in addition, we've developed at UCLA our own student exchange programs with Korea University and Seoul National University, and that continues. I think it's been obviously stopped briefly by the pandemic, but I suspect that will return to sort of normal levels quite soon. In terms of scholarship, at least in my understanding, a lot of our historical scholarship has actually not been in the technology areas, but actually through our Center for Korean Studies, which has been very strong, very long-standing, and has deep ties with Korean universities, and a number of collaborative research partnerships on everything studying global migration of highly trained professionals to the world of the garment trade, wide range of topics that dealt with the Buddhist thought and translation of Buddhist texts. And there's been, I think, a very close relationship with Korean universities, and that's historically, I think, been a strong part of our relationship with Korea. More recently, I'd say there's been more interactions in technology areas. And that's been really brought about by individual faculty members that have developed strong linkages. So, like most of our experiences, it's really faculty members that drive these relationships, not institutional will, but stars. And we have a superstar, Dennis Hong, who's actually a roboticist who is well known in Korea. In fact, I brought him to Korea to give a talk, and he was like a rock star So young people in Korea know him well. And he's developed an enormous number of collaborations, but not just with institutions, but with companies. So I think he developed cooking robots for Woo-Wah Brothers. I'm not sure what company that is, but Woo-Wah cooking robots. He's developed delivery robots for LG Electronics. And I think in 2021, he was actually appointed honorary ambassador to Seoul by the Seoul metropolitan government. So clearly active, very interested in building ties with Korean institutions. So again, if I say where the future is, I look for robotics as one of those areas which I think we can grow. Another area is actually through our Institute of Energy Research with, and this is Professor Rajit God, who has partners, with the Korea Institute of Energy Research, and this is smart grid technology. So Rajit has, I know, a number of strong collaborations in India, but also in Korea. And again, that's an area where I think there's growth. You know, just asking our folks about where there's opportunities for growth in our interactions, what I heard from, largely from our engineering folks, was autonomous vehicles, an area where we would be looking for interactions, conservation and climate change issues affecting the Pacific Ocean, obviously. And also with Carol, we have a film school with film, television, and theater, as Carol does. And, you know, there's been a rapid growth of Korean cinema. And we're always interested in finding ways that we can work together there. So I'd say, you know, we're very interested in developing more linkages with Korea. I'd say we have a modest, compared to some universities in the US, probably a modest to moderate interactions with Korea. And so there's room for growth. And I'm always interested in finding new opportunities. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So Jean, just a comment. Dennis Hong gave a plenary presentation a couple of years ago at the UKC meeting.
He's a star.
He is.
Yeah, his presentation was like a rock star performance rather than a presentation.
I must say, we had a meeting of alumni, an alumni gathering, and he had robots working through the audience, moving through the audience, serving drinks. You know?
It is a performance.
It is a performance.
Okay, next we'll hear from Dr. Hyungju Park from Aju University regarding exchange of.
It's back to me. So it's. I mean, I'm learning a lot today, actually, from your presentations. And actually, I'm a UC Berkeley alum, so I have a certain ties to UC, but I haven't really exploited that link yet for my university's program. So Aju University has dual degree programs with Stony Brook and also Illinois Tech, and then we have a summer language programs with University of Michigan and University of Washington, but not with the UC yet. But so that certainly I think that can be explored. One thing that actually I thought about is there is this new possibility of developing or actually making the exchange programs a little bit more serious. For example, we have a number of exchange students coming from Europe and also from US, but you know they usually spend one semester or sometimes a year. But my university is starting this micro degree program from next academic year. Micro degree program, basically if students take, let's say 3 to 5 classes in certain cluster, then they get a micro degree in that area, for example. So certain areas that we are thinking of is for example, K-entertainment, because that's very popular among young people. And so this is like a language, culture, and that issue together. And then we will cluster certain classes and make a micro degree program in, let's say, K-entertainment. This is just one example. So let's say if an exchange student comes and let's say take a couple of classes in that cluster, and then because online teaching is now ubiquitous, so let's say they go back to their university and then finish up the remaining whatever the last few courses online, then the host institution can give the micro degree in that program. So this is much lighter than dual degree program, but still it will give students additional motivation to participate in exchange programs. I think, because of the pandemic, our outbound program is very badly affected, and I want to encourage students to go out. I mean, the students need to experience different culture and need to be global. And there must be certain ways to motivate them. And I think if they can go, let's say if they go visit. Let's say if they visit USC for 1 year as an exchange student, and if they can get a micro degree in certain area because of that from USC, I think they will be more motivated to actually think about going there.
That's cool.
Yeah. So nano degree or micro degree are very, very much lighter than dual degree, but it's kind of but dual degree requires spending at least 2 years physically at that host institution, but this would require only 6 months or 1 semester or 2 semesters, and this will, I think, accelerate the exchange programs. So it's basically, I guess, my proposal to you, and that maybe we should pursue this. And
Can I just say one thing really quickly? My experience with some of this is when you do something like a nano degree, I love that. I think especially with the potential certificate or degree, but I found when students even spend 1 or 2 terms at another university, international students, they can get very connected, and so it doesn't, it's not maybe the same as being a whole degree, but I think it can really be enriching. It's not too fast. And I think makes it potentially very, very worthwhile pursuing.
That's great. So I'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we have President Rosenbaum to comment on the exchange.
Yeah, thank you. Going this late in the program reminds me of the cautionary adage that everything's been said, but not everyone said it. And I hope I won't fall completely into that trap, but perhaps have a somewhat different perspective. But I will start by echoing President Folt's comment about taking advantage of the research enterprise in terms of thinking of these exchanges. And we've had a lot of success in that in terms of, we actually have a program for students to come do summer research with KAIST, and some of our students going abroad. And I think that's an extraordinarily valuable exercise because the students get embedded in a mini community, right? A laboratory community. And so there's a natural way for them to learn culture and make friendships. And so it's obviously not the only way to do it, but I think it also goes to President Park's comments about the micro and nano degrees as well, that just being in a place can contribute a lot. We also have joint research programs with, for example, the Weizmann Institute in Israel, where their research funding, which is done by application, where the requirement is that one of the investigators be at Weizmann in this case, and at least one at Caltech. And these work very well. There are not a lot of visits back and forth, so the connections really are mostly online, but there's a joint research interest. And what we found is that there are many more applications than we can afford to fund, but a bunch of those that aren't funded go ahead anyway, because people are so excited about the possibility of those interactions. And I know Professor Kim has seen this at University of Chicago with Argonne and Fermilab, which have similar sorts of programs. We have a similar program here between Caltech and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So I think that model is an interesting one to explore. It's particularly interesting in terms of being able to get philanthropic support, which adds to your research portfolio in this fashion. So I just would encourage us to think about that. Finally, I'd like to make a comment about in-person versus online, and maybe this is too much of my own experience, but I found that going to colloquia, giving colloquia online across the world is a great experience. In general, when you're invited, you know someone, you have a connection, it's manageable, you don't have to travel on an airplane. It's terrific. You get a lot out of it. I have found that going to conferences where you don't know anyone is a disaster. And maybe it's just a comment on my inability to connect to others in this venue. But even with software like GatherTown, it's very hard to really have those serendipitous encounters or a cup of coffee or whatever it is. So I think we need to think carefully about constructing programs where we create those personal connections and then it can go online. One model that we've used is when another institution, for example, is about to hire an assistant professor, but before they start, maybe they spend a year at Caltech. That way they know everyone at Caltech, and then when they go back to their home institution, they wind up knowing our students, sending their students back to Caltech, whatever it might be. But it's that personal flavor that then gives you the momentum to be able to do this online. So just some possible additions to the kind of portfolios that we already have.
Okay, so are there any questions from in general across the audience? Sure.
I saw actually.
Chancellor Block, please unmute. Chancellor Block, you're muted.
Yes. So I just make a comment, and it's in response to one that Tom Rosenbaum made about a relationship with in Israel with joint research projects, which we have a very similar relationship with the Weizmann. And it's fascinating. We should think about that because that's really driven. Ours was driven by donors in the U.S., which were passionate both about the UCLA and about the Weizmann, and wanted to see us work together. So provided support that really, from our side, seeded the research grants. I think there's a lot of opportunities, again, even with Korean Americans, to get support to, again, find an institution in Korea and an institution in the U.S. and fund support. So I think, Tom, the model you pointed to, I think is quite doable in other parts of the world as well. And I think Korea would be an ideal place to generate some of those, we are using it for pilot projects, literally, a couple of year projects that hopefully will lead to larger research engagements.
So I think, Dr. Lee, I will move the table to you.
Okay. All right. Thank you for all. And there was a president of KCA listening, watching, but I don't see his name.
Yeah, he just left.
He just left. But we have a president-elect here. KCA, I like to get your, we actually didn't physically advertise this session. It seems like more like by private, but I like to see if we can make it public because it's so good. And I like to see if we can make it available to our members after the conference.
You mean this recording?
Yeah, recording. And if nobody objects distribution, can KACA make it available to all our 10,000 members?
Yeah, I think first we have to get approval from those in this session. I most likely we can put that on web page and have email sent out to our members.
Okay. Do anybody here has objection that we sharing with Korean American scientists, engineers?
Nope, that's nice.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll do
that's
that
great.
because we didn't. Our UKC planning committee was confused with many things going on, but then they forgot to put the link to the website. I went to the website, then I couldn't find the link. So I think some our participants couldn't find the forum link. So that's unfortunate. So with President-elect Kim's commitment, and we will share this file with the rest of our members.